are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show.
Today we're talking about Handshake.
Shake your money maker!
I can't believe you even wrote that. But anyway, you think about, this is a topic that I don't think is talked about that often. And I think for some people, it's just a very natural or a trained way of shaking hands that has a very powerful impression.
Absolutely.
And there are others who maybe have never actually been trained in how to do the handshake properly.
And do you know how I know that?
Yeah, I do know how you know that, but why don't you tell the listeners how you know that?
Well, I mean, all of us have shook hands with people, right? And
Yes.
we shook hands with people and we're like, oh my gosh, that was a pretty bad handshake.
Yeah.
And you were just not impressed. And it kind of sets the tone for the meeting, kind of knowing just a prejudgment of who the person is and how they feel and how they act. And there's just a lot of things that are communicated in a handshake.
I think your handshake can make or break your first impression with someone.
Yeah.
In fact, I know that it does. And so we're going to talk about this. And for those of you listening and you've never really thought about your handshake before and you've always just sort of done what you do, I'd really like you to consider just assessing your handshake the next few times that you shake hands and see how it goes for you and really pay attention to what the reaction is from the person who's shaking your hand. You know, do you hear from people when you shake their hand? Have you ever heard someone say, oh my gosh, you have an incredible handshake, or that was a great handshake? If you're not hearing that, you know, there may be an opportunity to improve.
Well, and are you aware of handshakes in general? So when somebody sticks their hand out and you shake it, are you feeling that? Are you taking that information in, or are you just like, oh, okay, move on and let's have that conversation? Because
a lot of people really aren't present during the handshake. Let's just say that. Now, if you're one of those people who has trouble remembering names, I'm guessing that this lack of awareness might apply to your handshake as well, and here's why. Usually when we meet someone for the first time, we have so much noise going on in our heads.
Yeah, about ourselves.
Yeah. Right? Like, what am I going to say? What is this person going to think? Who is this person? What are they going to think of me? Like, whatever, right? There's just a lot of noise, chatter that goes on.
Yeah.
So if you're one of those people who says, oh my God, I'm terrible at remembering names, it's typically just because you're not present in the moment when you're doing that very, very first initial introduction. So we're going to talk about a couple of different observations that we've made over the years. We've taught on this over the years as well. And maybe some mistakes and also some best practices for the handshakes.
And, this may be used as a podcast for us. So we are going to be more describing what the handshake would do, because those of you that are on Facebook Live will see this, but if you're not and you're just listening to it, we'll explain it to you.
Yeah, so we're going to do our best. For those of you just listening on audio, and because you're driving somewhere and you're listening by podcast, we'll do our best to describe. But this tends to be a podcast that maybe you're going to want to view if this is an area of development for you. So you can find that viewing either on our Facebook page at heatherchristie.com, or you can find it on the Wooditch Network, which you can just do a Google search for the Wooditch Network. All of our podcasts are up and live on video there as well. Okay?
And at Gulf Shore Business.
At Gulf Shore Business, they also have it on their website. You can go to gulfshorebusiness.com. Okay, so let's start off with just some generalities around the handshake. So first and foremost, you know that we have a very, very limited window of opportunity to make a first impression. And so the handshake, although we'll be talking about the physical shake as really the primary focus of this podcast, we are going to include some of the other body language that goes along with the handshake because it's equally as important. So, for example, when you first meet somebody, what is your face doing, right? I like to say, if you're happy and enjoying yourself, inform your face and throw a smile on there, because we know that someone who has a smile is much more pleasing to meet than someone who has a scowl, right? And if you're not conscious, or if you're stressed up, you're just not present in the moment, You don't even really know what your face is doing. So that's an opportunity to just like, I'm going to say first things first, take a breath. Right before you meet somebody, get present. Just get yourself in the moment, clear all that clutter, and just focus the intention on meeting this person and having some level of excitement or engagement, right? Like try to muster that up when you first meet someone. And I know for some of you, that is just not comfortable. It's not fun. It's not easy. Like you're at a networking event and you really, really don't want to be there. Well, guess what? We can tell if you really don't want to be there, because even if you say the right words, your body language will show us otherwise. So again, I think setting the intention is the first most critical thing that we can do when it comes time for that initial greeting and that handshake.
Yeah, and you can always tell when somebody is being forced to go to a networking event, because you can tell that they don't want to be there and that their company paid for them to go and they need to go. And they have this look on their face like, I don't want to be here. And they're they look a little scared too.
Yeah.
They can.
Tentative, anxious, stressed. I mean, there's all kinds of emotions that we read when we're doing the initial meeting with someone, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't have to be an expert in body language to tell when somebody's just not having it at any event that you attend.
Yeah, so let's get into the handshake. So
let's talk about the handshake itself. Right. Some of the best practices. Give me one of the best practices that you have for handshakes.
Well, I'm very, very conscious of when I shake somebody's hand, how it feels.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, and there's been studies on this, believe it or not. There's been studies on it, and there are like 8 different categories of the type of handshake, not the categories, but the senses, the strategy. And there's, from having like cold, clammy hands to how firm you shake to, are your hands too dry? Do you give the limp wrist? That whole, and so when I shake somebody's hand, the first thing, when I shake somebody's hand, if it's a good handshake, that immediately sets the tone for me that I'm meeting somebody that has some confidence. That generally when they have a good handshake, meaning it's not too hard, it's not too soft, it feels right, that person usually comes off to me as a very like just grounded, nice, just kind of got their act together type of person. That's my impression that I get immediately.
All right, so for you, it really is the feel the firmness of the grip. And let's just talk about what that right grip is, because I think that for those who haven't actually studied this or maybe been taught the right kind of handshake, the grip is very simple. The handshake, what do they say, 2,500 years this handshake thing has been around since ancient Greek times. And it's about our hands actually fitting together almost like puzzle pieces, right?
It's pretty funny that we're talking about this.
It is kind of funny.
That handshakes, because they've been around for so long. And it's such a basic way, right?
Yeah.
Of greeting somebody. But the reason we decided to do this is because we know there are many, many people out there that have horrible handshakes and they don't know it.
And it's not serving you. And that's really why we want to share this, because that is not serving you. So the level of firmness on the grip, it's really important to get that piece right. And I know this sounds just ridiculous, but seriously, try practicing it with somebody who is close to you, right? So when you're doing that handshake, making sure you go web to web with the thumb.
To this web?
This web to this web with the thumb. And gripping around the bottom with all 4 fingers. I'm wearing blue nail polish, so you can actually see this. Grip with all 4 fingers. Because when you do that, you've made the actual connection. Now, notice that Paul's hand is not turning white because I'm not squeezing it like a death grip, which would be the wrong way to do it. I call that the bone crusher. And there's nothing ever pleasant about shaking hands with someone who feels the need to squeeze so hard. And maybe they do it because they're really showing you how excited they are to meet you, or maybe they're doing it to assert some level of dominance. I think most often they do it because they're unaware of how strong and how hard they're gripping.
Yeah.
And I've got a very strong hand. I mean, I play tennis all the time. So it's not as though you're going to hurt me when you shake my hand, but man, you can tell a bone crusher anywhere.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we know people who are those bone crusher handshakes where I don't know, at some level of competition, like, can I actually crack something in there? Can I crack a knuckle when I shake your hand?
And so let me ask you, do you have men that do the bone crusher on you?
I've had, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had men do the bone crusher on me. Not a lot of women have done it, but it's happened before. And again, either it's anxiety coming up, it's just complete lack of awareness, or maybe you've been taught in some way from someone in your past that that is the right way to do to show assertiveness. I don't know, but it really doesn't work. And I think what happens is it's completely distracting from the initial meeting, because all you can think of is like, man, that hurt. I can't, like, ouch.
Yeah, I've had it where I've met guys and I could tell that they want to assert themselves as the alpha male, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they got that like bravado about them, and they come in with the handshake and they crush my hand. And I got a pretty strong hand.
You got a big
hand.
Yeah.
But I get done and I'm like,
What was that?
what is that all about? That is so, and it immediately, so you talk about how it makes the first impression. That first impression to me is just like a total turnoff. I mean,
And I think for most it is.
If it's conflicting, usually it isn't. Usually that big bone crusher comes with the guy that's trying to show you something, trying to show me something. And it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's very, and it's a total turnoff.
And by the way, those who have the bone crusher handshake, everyone knows it, and they will talk about it outside, like, oh, that guy, he's got that handshake that'll literally take you out. Like, people don't necessarily want to shake hands. They'd rather go in for a hug with this guy because they're afraid of getting hurt.
Yeah, totally.
So, all right, so that's a bone crusher. We're clear on that one. Now, the other one that honestly...
Well, let's go the opposite of the bone crusher.
Okay, let's do the opposite. Yeah. Perfect. Has it ever happened to you where you go to shake someone's hand and they give
You're going in
hard to do the web to web.
Let's just so you can see.
And are you going to do the shake or me?
You do it.
Okay. So you
because in a lot of cases it's more women that do it.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Maybe for you. For me,
I never have.
Let's show them first,
okay.
And then let's. Okay.
Right.
So you guys tell us. Have you experienced this?
You write it in if you have more men or more women that do this handshake. You ready?
Okay, so they come in, you're ready to go web to web, and they only give you just the littlest bit of their hands, like the fingertips, and they don't allow you to actually grip the hand. It's kind
You're
of
supposed to go like this.
Yeah, like it almost looks like I need you to kiss my hand. So it's
so
just
you're going in web to web, and then you get
they stop you.
They stop short.
They stop short.
And then you get the
it's
kind of the dead fish
really,
type of hand.
Yeah, dead fish, like really light. I almost don't want to touch you, but I definitely, like, there's something awkward about doing web to web in my mind, right? So here's what I don't understand the psychology behind this, but I'd really love to know if you are someone who does that handshake. You know, Paul says, "Ooh, women are way more likely to do this." I do not find that. I find a lot of men doing this handshake. So my question is, are you doing that because you've been taught that maybe that's polite because you're shaking the hand of a female and so you're maybe being more dainty? I don't know. Are you doing that for some other reason, or are you just completely unaware of how to do a firm handshake? But I do get it all the time. Not all the time, but many, many times from men. And usually, okay, we study behavioral styles. That's where our expertise is. Usually it is the person with the style of being more reserved.
More introverted.
The person who's more introverted. The person who is much more quiet, much more shy. That is typically the person you get that handshake from.
Yeah, and like I said before, the handshakes are first impression in a lot of cases. And so when you get somebody who gives you either the bone crusher or you get the limp fish handshake, that immediately tells you something about that person. So the reason we're doing this particular topic is because we want you to check your handshake. Do you have a handshake that's setting the right impression or the wrong impression?
Yeah, because if your handshake is setting the right impression, then you're really starting off that initial meeting with someone going, wow, that was a great handshake.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested in meeting this person. And if you start off with one of the others that we're sharing with you, what you're doing is you're completely distracting from what that initial meeting is going to be about, maybe potentially distracting from who you really are. And so doing that sort of half a handshake, the limp fish that Paul's telling you, What I do, I actually, if you give me that limp handshake. Okay, so I'm going in and he only gives me a little bit. I'll actually try to, but you're not that strong. It's usually soft. I usually will try to and go all the way and do the grip just because I want to have that initial. And I
won't do that because I'm the guy, and I don't want to push through, and I'm like, ooh, okay.
But I think, for me, I want to let someone know that, I want to have that proper first impression. And so I don't know if someone then feels I'm way too dominant, but the reality is I want to get in there and just have the web to web and do the handshake.
Yeah, right? And just, on a side note, every time I get a good handshake from a woman, in most cases I will compliment her on her handshake because I'm really impressed when I meet. It just tells me immediately that that person's confident, whether it's a man or a woman. I think confidence is the first thing I take away from it. Somebody with a good, firm, solid handshake, not the bone crusher, not the limp wrist, not some of the other ones we're going to talk about in just a couple minutes. That sets the impression of just confidence, certainty.
Yeah. And you know what? I compliment men and women all the time if I get a good handshake. But I would say that it's not rare by any stretch of the imagination. But the great handshake is not just the grip, it's the everything. It's the eye contact, it's the smile, it's knowing that there's an intention behind that person to meet you. And you can feel all of that. You can sense it all. And when the whole package is there, that's when I'm like, wow. Yeah. This person's totally here in the moment, which that in itself is unique, right? To just be present.
Got it. And so let's move on to the next.
Okay, I want to do my next one, which is one of my all-time favorites. I call this one the pulse checker. And okay, I had never even been aware of this. I just hadn't come across it in Chicago that I knew of when we lived up there. But when I came down here, I started noticing it more and more. So I don't know if this is a regional thing or if I was just unaware back then, which is entirely possible.
And it is possible. I mean, we are a much older demographic down here. You may want to check the pulse more often.
Oh, you're funny. I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. But that's really good, Paul.
So I'm going to have to show you. I'll be the pulse checker.
I was going to say, we have to do left hand.
I'll do it because
I know. Oh, I can do it. Yeah. Sorry.
I can
All right, so here's how you do it. Here's how the pulse checker goes. It's 2 straight fingers when you go in for the handshake. So Paul's going to demonstrate so you can see the 2 straight fingers. Okay, do you see what's happening here? Bam.
Bam.
It's almost right like there. You're making like a gun.
Yeah, that's like a 72 beats per minute.
And so I don't have much to say about this one other than awkward. Like, it's just awkward. Why are you doing that? I just don't understand. Like,
let's do it again.
Okay.
Bam.
That's
right there.
Oh, I don't know. But again, it just feels kind of weird. So what I'm left with when I have that at the initial handshake is just one of these, I don't really get that. So if there's anybody out there who actually does the pulse checker, you do the pulse checker and you've got a reason behind it, please tell me what that is. Why were you taught to do that? I believe, again, it's one of those instances where people are just unaware. They've gotten into this habit of shaking a hand that way for whatever reason. And it's just uncomfortable and it kind of feels weird.
Yeah.
So again, distracting from that initial meeting. So then without...
And so just in one, so talking about like the good handshake, the right way to, I mean, so you can't feel the way that we feel on this, but you know what the right amount of pressure is, the wetness, the dry, like how dry your hands are, like they damp, or they
do about that.
So before that, so I just want to show you, it is this palm, what is it, the palm here?
It's the side
it's
of
like
the
palm of side of the palm of the
From
edge.
your
That's where
pinky all the way down.
the fingers should go. Not here, not here,
Not the wrist.
there. All on
the side.
underneath on the bottom of the palm, all 4 fingers.
Yeah.
Web to web, 4 fingers on the palm. That's
firm.
it. And firm.
Not strong, but firm, right? That's
Right.
it. Easy. It really is a very
So
simple.
let's talk about how much time you spend on a handshake.
Because that one's funny too. You sometimes get someone who shakes your hand and they're like this and they're kind of aggressive and they're shaking.
Oh yeah.
And you're talking and you're like,
shaking
give it back,
baby
give it
syndrome
back.
here, right?
Give it back. So like just, a couple, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, like that.
Yeah.
I would not go longer than a 3-second count. More like 2 is probably fine.
It's like a tap out almost. 3 seconds. Like at the most.
Oh, is that what the tap
1,
on
2,
is?
3, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
that's it.
yeah, so just a short period of time. Now you also will find those people. Have you ever had this one happen where you go in to shake the hand, and let's just say that it's someone you haven't met before, because this is where I think this is a big mistake. Someone you haven't met before, they go in to shake your hand, and so you're coming in to shake my hand, and I'm like, oh, no, I'm a hugger.
Oh, no.
I'm a hugger.
Oh, no.
And so I stop the handshake, and I literally just jump right in because I'm a hugger. Now, that unfortunately, like if you happen to randomly be meeting someone else who's a hugger, that can work, okay? That can work.
Yeah.
But if you've never met this person and you don't know, what you need to know is there are people who absolutely hate when you crowd their personal space. He doesn't like it. Like if we ever go to a church service that has the opening session where you're greeting people and the people who you're greeting who you've never met before are just all full of hugs,
that creeps me
he
out.
literally, he won't go back. So
Now,
but
put a drink in me, you know.
wow, yeah. If you're at a bar, it's a different story. Paul's a hugger, right?
Like everybody.
Not everyone. So, but this is really important to get. If you're a hugger, and I know, and there are people out there who are like, not only am I a hugger, but I've pulled this off with the most non-huggers ever. Well, pulled it off versus them enjoying it, those are two totally different things, right? I get that you can pull off a hug because if you force someone into it, they might hug you. But the reality is, have you ever done this where you've hugged someone and they've had like the straight arm clench, like you can feel every muscle tensing? That's because they're not huggers.
Yep.
So never make the mistake that someone wants you to go in for a hug. And in fact, unless I know someone very well, I always offer the handshake first. If they instead start to go for the hug, I'll change and go for the hug. And I'm doing that out of respect for the other person, right? Because not everyone's a hugger, and there are people who actually despise being touched like that. And quite frankly, with everything that's going on in our world politically, I'm just going to say, there are people who are probably getting offended if you're hugging them. So let's just throw that out there and move on, because we need to move on from that one.
And so let's also talk about, so the handshake in itself is just that web to web, the fingers underneath the palm, nice firm. Make sure your hands are dry. So if your hands get like, you know, it's summer in Florida right now, so it's hot, and your hands
very easily.
And so, but if you're somebody who has kind of damp hands a lot, you need to wipe your hands off, because even though you may have a great firmness, you may have a web to web, you may do the exact thing, so that feeling of getting somebody's sweat on your own hand, it can gross you out.
Or even if you've just washed your hands and they didn't dry completely or whatever. I mean, I've literally at times, if my hands are wet for some reason and I'm not in the kind of outfit where I can just kind of dry them off, I'll be like, how about we do a fist bump because my hands are wet? I just, you know, like
and I tell people, I just washed my hands.
Yeah.
So if they're a little damp,
so
if they're really damp, I just washed my hands, so that's why they mean.
Yeah.
I let them know that because
otherwise,
if you don't,
have you done that where you shook someone's hand and it was so sweaty that you actually had to wipe your own hand off, and then that's so awkward.
So now that completely distracts. I mean, you talk about taking you off the rails of meeting somebody, right? You're like, oh, whoa, I just have a ton of sweat from some person's hand on my hand.
Yeah, like
now.
I gotta go.
And now I gotta figure out where to wipe this thing off.
Yeah.
And you can't do it on their back. So
look, and there are some people who maybe have a condition where their palms sweat. In that case, do you just have a handkerchief with you? There's grab a cocktail napkin, something where you can just quickly, you know, it's cool. Like, I don't think anybody's going to get uptight about that. But it is definitely a distraction. If you've just had a handshake with someone and you're left with whatever residue on your hand, whatever it is, like, you know, that's just awkward.
Well, and also, so I think having a dry hand isn't that bad compared to the real damp, wet hand, right?
Yeah.
So that one I'm not too concerned about, because that one I'm sort of like, oh, somebody's, you know, whatever. But another one is temperature. So, you know, when the air conditioning's on and it's freezing in a room and your hand's like, just like an icicle, and you give somebody a handshake and they shake your hand and they say your hands are freezing, that also distracts from the initial meeting, from the initial impression that's being made. And it says something about you. It tells you somebody that, you know, why are your hands cold? Is something wrong with you? Is, you know, do you, you know, whatever it is. Do you not have good blood flow.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and
It
that
just has
one,
to just, you have those
that one
questions.
literally you can do like this.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't know about you guys, but in Florida, for whatever reason, when it's 90 degrees outside in the summer, they feel it has to be 60 inside. And so it does. It gets freezing cold. And I am one of those people where my nose is cold, my fingertips are cold.
Yeah.
So I'm literally doing this to warm up before shaking someone's hand, which can also look funny.
And so the handshake itself is the most important thing, but there's really, that's part A, and then there's 2A, and that is eye contact.
There's A and 2A. Okay. Not A and B.
Well, I say that because it's almost as important as, so that's 1A is the handshake.
Yeah.
2A is eye contact.
Yeah.
So when you get a good
Yeah.
handshake, right? So we do the handshake, but we look into each other's eyes. So you're not looking away, you're not looking at their feet, you're
A
not
lot of
looking
people
at
are looking down.
yeah, or you're looking at the
their hand.
handshake, you look in their eye,
Mhm.
and you give the couple of shakes, and you break.
And then you break.
Yep.
And that's it.
That's
And
it.
of course, you're usually introducing yourself when you do this. And one of the things I do when I do my introduction, I give my full name.
Mhm.
Because unless I know them like they're a very good friend of mine and of course they remember my name, I actually still give my name if it's someone who I've met before and maybe I already know their name. I never expect that someone remembers my name. So I just think that's really courteous, especially if you are a person who gets out and does a lot of networking and you meet a lot of people. I think that's just courteous. So give your name.
And I am guilty of this, and I've had this happen to me, and it's a little embarrassing, is when I shake somebody's hand, they'll give me their name, and I forget to give them my name.
Oh yeah. That's
And then we separate, and they
they're
go,
like,
"What's your
"What's your
name?"
name?"
And I'm
Yeah.
like, "I didn't even tell them my name."
Yeah.
I mean, really? I
Yeah.
just met them.
Yeah.
I mean, but so I have to be really conscious of that.
And even if you've met someone, like let's say we're at an event and we meet early in the event and you run by them again later in the event, I still give my full name again because they've probably just met another 20 people and I would never expect that they remember my name. And I know for most people it's so awkward to say, "I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Will you please tell me again?"
Yep.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with just asking. But if you ask a second time, lock it in then, right? My friend Ron White, who's the memory expert, he's the U.S. memory champion, he taught me that when you're meeting someone, in your head, you should be saying as you walk up to them, "What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? What's your name?" Because as you're like programming your subconscious to remember it. And I'm telling you what, since the time he's taught me that strategy, I have been exponentially better at remembering names. It's about like really wanting to know at that very first moment when you're meeting. But you've got a lot of other things going on in that moment too, because you're doing the handshake, you're doing the eye contact, hopefully you're doing the smile, and you're introducing yourself.
Cool.
So,
So I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, and I'll let you finish your coffee. So if we shake hands, when we shake hands, what's your feeling about somebody touching the other hand on top of it or touching your shoulder? What is your opinion about that? Because I see a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I think that it's probably not the best way to do the first impression. And I know that it's showing maybe a genuine care for someone or a real friendliness.
Yeah.
In business situations. Now, like if you're at church or something and you want to really be warm and you're welcome, I think that's probably okay. But again, remember, there are people who still feel that invades their personal space.
True.
For me, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But I always keep in mind like the whole realm of people you could run into. And if you get someone who is uncomfortable when you're in their space, the handshake is about all they can handle. So even that extra little tap on the outside of the hand, probably not good. So I recommend that you not do that unless it's someone who you already know, who you've met before, who you're friendly with. Better to just allow it to be professional, especially at that first meeting.
Okay. So 2 other things, and then you can wrap this up.
Okay.
All right.
I can't wait to hear what your other 2 things
So
are.
two tips. One, and this is one that I learned and I use all the time when it happens. Occasionally when you are just meeting somebody, you'll stick your hand out, they'll stick their hand out to give you the handshake, and you miss, and it just gets kind of messed up, right? You just don't make, or it ends up, you know you both have good handshakes, but it just never connects properly.
You end up doing a
Don't
pulse check.
leave it like that. Do not leave it like that. Step away, and don't even step away. Just say, can we do that again? That's all you need to say again, because they'll want to start engaging or whatever after it. And I want to make sure that I make that good impression. So if we mess up, we mess up and it just wasn't right, I say, can we do that again? And then I shake their hand and just kind of smile at it. But that way, I guarantee myself to get a good handshake and to make that right impression. So don't feel uncomfortable about that. Actually, it's a really good thing to do.
It's a good icebreaker, because usually the person on the receiving end was kind of embarrassed about the handshake, and when you say let's do that again, it kind of lets them off the hook too, like I flubbed this one up.
Right? Yeah, totally. And my next and the second tip that I have for you, networking events, anywhere you go, make sure you wash your hands after you're done. You go to these networking events and everybody's shaking each other's hands, and then you're going to eat food and people are putting food in their mouth with their hands. You're like, oh my gosh. Just be safe. wash your hands. I'm not a germaphobe, but I mean, it's just, that one kind of weirds me out a little bit, you know, because especially when you're shaking a lot of
There's a
hands,
lot of shaking, yes.
So, so you can wrap it up.
Yeah, I think we've really kind of covered all different aspects, all different angles. It's probably more than you've ever wanted to know about handshakes. But what's going to happen out of this, watching this or listening to this, is you're going to be way more aware not only of someone else's handshake and how they're doing it, but you're going to become more aware of your own. And as we've said, in most of the issues that people have in handshaking that really aren't serving them so well or derailing them, most of the time they're not aware of it. I really, really believe that. And of course, I don't feel it appropriate to coach someone when we have a handshake and it doesn't work well, unless of course if we're a client or someone I knew well. But it's not the kind of thing that we correct with each other, right? We just don't do that. We don't say like, hey, can I talk to you about your handshake? And I did hear, I can't think of his name right now, but he's a famous speaker. He's got a book out there. I might come up with it. Andy Andrews said that he did this amazing thing with his child. So he was very involved in his church group, and his son was young, like 5, 6 years old. And what would happen is all of the elders in the church who he was, serving on a committee with or whatever, when they saw his son, they'd go up to him and be like, hey, man, and they'd give him a high five because he's a kid. And he literally sat them down and said, I really...
He sat down the elders.
Yeah. He sat down the elders. And he said, I really, really need you to do me a favor. I want to teach my son the proper way to introduce himself. I want him to be able to do that with confidence, with a nice firm handshake, and look them in the eye and really start showing the confidence right now at this young age. And every time you see him and you're like, hey, man, with the high five or the fist bump, he's not learning, and he respects you. So I'm going to ask you, would you please get on board with me and really help my son to develop this confidence at a young age? They all agreed. And so what they began doing with his son is when his son came up, they would give him the proper handshake. They would look him in the eye and they would say hello to him, and they would compliment him every time he gave a firm and proper handshake. And you think about what that did for him. I mean, the studies, if you read the studies on handshakes, everything from getting a position or not getting a position in a new job, a career,
absolutely.
It's everything. I mean, the statistics actually show, hands down, that if you have a poor handshake, you're not as likely to get the job. So there's a lot of reasons why it matters, but absolutely, if your handshake is not serving you, you want to make sure you know about it and make some corrections to it.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. As we said, if you're listening to this podcast, you might be better off actually viewing it on video. So if you want to catch it on video, you can either go to Facebook and type in heatherchristie.com. You can go to Gulf Shore Business, because our podcast is produced in partnership with Gulf Shore Business Magazine. Or you can go to the Wooditch Network, and they
or our YouTube channel.
Or our YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed yet to our YouTube channel, if you type in Heather Christie, and then just ignore the rock star Heather Christie, because she's probably still going to be coming up first. But if you type in Heather Christie and scroll down, I should be the second one on there. And all of our podcasts that we do, all of our Facebook Lives that we do are also there on video for you. So connect with us if you haven't already. Please subscribe. And if you know someone who could use some help with their handshake in a very subtle way, but honestly, because you love them and you want them to have a more effective first impression, please share this one with them.
Have a great week.